I almost turned it off at the 11-minute mark. If I had, I never would have found out the host was talking about me. I listen to podcasts on my drive home. It's the only time of day that belongs to me, 40 minutes of empty highway between my job and my apartment, where nobody needs anything from me. That week, I'd started a new show. Some psychology podcast a coworker mentioned, hosted by a guy who interviewed strangers about the moments that changed how they saw the world. Nothing flashy. Just two people talking. I liked it because it made me feel like I already understood people pretty well. I've always thought of myself as observant. I notice things, how someone's voice changes when they're lying, how people avoid eye contact when they're ashamed. I'd cataloged these little tells for years, quietly, the way some people collect stamps. It made me feel one step ahead in most conversations. Safer, somehow. Like I couldn't be blindsided if I already knew what people were about to do. That Tuesday's episode was about assumptions, how the stories we tell ourselves about other people are usually wrong, and how we rarely find out, because we never ask. I remember thinking, not me, though. I ask. I pay attention. The guest on that episode was a woman named Elena, a nurse. She was telling a story about a coworker she disliked for 2 years. A woman who was cold, distant, never joined the lunch table, never laughed at jokes. Elena had decided early on that this woman was arrogant. Thought she was better than everyone else on the floor. Then one night, they were both on a late shift, and the woman's phone rang. She stepped into the hallway to take it, and Elena followed to grab supplies from a nearby cart. She heard part of the call. The woman's mother, in another state, had dementia. The woman was calming her down over the phone, explaining for the 100th time who she was. Elena said something and her voice shifted after that. Not the coworkers, her own. She realized the distance she'd been reading as arrogance was something else entirely. Exhaustion. Grief, stretched thin over months. The woman wasn't avoiding her coworkers because she felt superior. She was surviving. I remember feeling that small, uncomfortable tug you get when a story lands closer than you expected. Nothing dramatic. Just a quiet, internal note, and I kept driving. What I didn't expect was for the episode to keep going. And for it to slowly stop being about Elena's coworker, and start sounding like it was about someone I knew. A neighbor. Her name was Carol. Older woman, lived 2 doors down from me. For the 8 months I'd lived in that building, she'd been, in my private assessment, unfriendly. She never said more than a clipped hello. Never made small talk in the hallway. Once, I'd held the elevator for her and she'd barely nodded before staring at her phone the entire ride down. I'd mentioned her to a friend once, calling her the cold one on my floor. I hadn't thought about it since. It wasn't personal. She was just a data point in my mental catalog. Aloof. Not worth much effort. The host asked Elena what she took away from that night in the hallway. Elena said something that stuck with me the rest of the drive. I realized I'd never actually tried to know her. I'd just decided who she was, and then collected evidence to prove myself right. I turned that phrase over a few times. Collected evidence to prove myself right. That was uncomfortably close to what I did. Not with strangers exactly, with everyone. I built a theory about a person early, usually within the first few interactions, and everything after that just slotted into the frame I'd already made. I didn't think of it as unfair. I thought of it as efficient. Reading people quickly felt like a skill. It never occurred to me that it might just be a shortcut for not looking closely. I got home that night and, out of habit more than anything, glanced toward Carol's door as I passed it in the hallway. I didn't think much of it. Just noticed it, the way the episode had put noticing on my mind. 2 days later, I saw her by the mailboxes. She was struggling to open the little metal door with her key, her hand shaking slightly. I almost walked past. That was my normal pattern, give the aloof woman her space, but the podcast was still sitting somewhere in the back of my head. I stopped and asked if she needed a hand. She looked up at me like she was surprised anyone had spoken to her first in a while. She said the lock had been sticking for months and the building never fixed it. I got the door open for her. She thanked me, and then, unexpectedly, she kept talking. Said she didn't get out much anymore since her husband passed the year before. Said the hallway small talk used to be his job, he was the friendly one. She'd never been good at it, even before. She said this almost apologetically, like she assumed I already had an opinion of her, and she was right. I stood there holding a stack of her junk mail, feeling something shift quietly in my chest. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was more like the sensation of a door opening onto a room I hadn't known was there. 8 months of the cold one on my floor, and it turned out she was just a widow who'd never learned how to be friendly without her husband beside her, doing it for both of them. I thought about how confident I'd been in my read of her. How little evidence it had actually taken, a clipped hello, a distracted elevator ride, for me to build an entire personality and file her away under it. I hadn't been wrong because I lacked information. I'd been wrong because I never went looking for any. I'd mistaken a first impression for a conclusion. That's the part that unsettled me most, driving home the rest of that week. Not that I'd misjudged one neighbor. It was realizing how many other people I'd probably done this to. Coworkers I'd quietly decided were difficult after one bad meeting. An old classmate I'd written off after a single awkward exchange. I started running back through memories, and each one had the same shape, a small moment, expanded into a whole verdict, never revisited. I started talking to Carol more after that. Nothing big. A few minutes by the mailboxes, sometimes on the stairs. She was funny, actually, in a dry way I never would have guessed from the hallway version of her. She started leaving her door open sometimes in the evening, like she wouldn't mind if someone stopped by. I did, twice, just to check on her. What changed in me wasn't really about Carol. It was about the habit. I noticed myself catching it in real time after that, the moment I'd start building a theory about someone from a scrap of behavior. A short reply. A tired expression. I'd feel the old instinct kick in, the urge to file it away as a fact about who they were. And now there was this small pause where I'd remember the hallway, the mailbox, the 8 months I'd spent being confidently wrong about a grieving woman 2 doors down. I think the reason that episode got to me wasn't the story itself. It was the timing, hearing it right when I was comfortable enough in my own perceptiveness to be careless with it. I'd spent years treating my first impressions as evidence instead of guesses. I wasn't reading people as well as I thought. I was just reading the surface, quickly, and calling it depth. I still listen to podcasts on that drive home. But I notice things differently now, mostly, how easy it is to build an entire person out of almost nothing, and how rarely we ever go back to check if we got it right. I wonder how many people are living 2 doors down from someone who's already decided who they are.